Welcome to the Superheroes Everyday Podcast. I'm Danny Horn. Thank you for joining us. On this podcast, we talk about pivotal moments in superhero movie history. Today, we are addressing the tremendously toyetic 1997 Ice Capade show, Batman and Robin. Now, you've got other things on your list for today. Believe me, I don't have time for this either. So I'm using the Sid Field 3-act structure to break up the episode. So this is Act 1 of Batman and Robin, and then I'll be releasing Act 2 and Act 3 later on in the week. Now I want to introduce my guest. It's graphic designer, writer, and publisher Stuart Manning. Stuart, hello.
Hi, Danny. Thanks for asking me.
Oh, it's so good to have you here.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Well, I know the way that I know you is you've done work on Doctor Who and Dark Shadows spin-offs, and those are two of my favorite TV shows, my favorite things, basically.
Yeah, all roads lead back to Dark Shadows, and if they don't lead back to Dark Shadows, certainly to Doctor Who. Yeah, it's kind of weird that stuff's like 20, it's nearly 30 years for me in both cases, which
Yeah.
is kind of alarming.
But they have a gravitational pull that you cannot avoid after a while.
Absolutely. It's like joining the civil service. You never leave.
Thrilled to have you here. A little backstory for the movie. Batman Forever was released in 1995 with a blockbuster promotional campaign designed to amp up the young set to a bewildering degree. There were tons of toys and music videos and endless McDonald's commercials. They made $184 million domestic, and it was number 2 for the year, just under Toy Story. And Batman Forever's own Toy Story was that they sold an estimated $1 billion worth of toys and other merchandise. Now, when the Warner Brothers are happy, they don't just sit around and smile all day. They do something about it. So they told director Joel Schumacher they wanted another film just like Batman Forever, but even more so. And they wanted it done in 2 years. This was not really enough time, but Schumacher got kind of swept up in the excitement. So now he's making another Batman film. And Warner Brothers figures if they're going to make 5 times more money on merchandise than they are on the movie tickets, that means the merchandise is 5 times more important than actually making the film. So Kenner Toys was heavily involved in the film's production. As we will see, Guy Kenner actually invented the concept of toyetic, which means it's how suitable a media property is to get merchandise as toys and games. And the initial comparison was Star Wars was a lot more toyetic than Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And that's why Kenner went for the Star Wars license and did amazingly well with it. So their requests for this movie to make Batman and Robin more toyetic was we got multiple heroes, this time adding Batgirl, multiple costume changes for the heroes, multiple vehicles, 3 visually distinct villains with vehicles and hideouts. And so we are going to see the impact of this as we go through the movie. And just running the numbers quickly, the movie, unfortunately, not a success, made $107 million at the domestic box office, which was the lowest of the Batman films by far. Came in at number 12 for the year, which for a heavily marketed franchise tentpole like this is kind of embarrassing. And the reviews were just devastating. Like Batman Forever was not loved by the critics. That got 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. Batman and Robin has 12%. So we are now talking about one of the least well-regarded movies. All right, let's jump into Act 1. Stuart, we have the big exciting thing right at the start with the overture is a new symbol, a new logo, which they are very excited about, where you've got the usual Batman logo, and then this new Robin logo comes up and kind of like slips into it and fits inside it.
Yeah, well, there's no subtext there. Yeah, I like this. I thought it looked confident. It looked not too wincingly CG for 1997.
It looks nice, but it is kind of like an operatic display of the branding.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And I mean, you almost get the pack shots of the heroes the minute we cut to live action. So it's, yeah, I think we're up front. This is the catalog.
Yes, exactly. This is the thing that we are doing. Because next, yeah, we see them suiting up. So we got their gloves and their chests and their butts and crotch and legs and eyes and batarangs, just real quick shots of that. Tell me your thoughts on this as the first thing we do.
I am amazed that there was not a studio note about this. I kind of, it makes me sort of wonder how much was Schumacher just viewed as the voice of God, that this was the guy
Yeah.
who'd made Batman lucrative, and therefore, let's not question, let's not interfere. But it's as idiosyncratic as anything in the film, and I think it sets the stall out.
My question is kind of like, who is it supposed to appeal to? Because I know it doesn't appeal to me, and I am usually the first guy in line for objectifying dudes in superhero movies. So I'm not sure like who those shots are actually for. It feels like sort of a close up on an action figure more than like this is a guy's actual butt.
It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Like how much the suits became the discourse for this film,
Hmm.
and the whole nipple thing feels a bit kind of wearisome and like it's been debated to death. But
Right.
I do sort of question what that was all about. And the more I've read and watched quite a lot of interviews with Joel Schumacher this week, I just sort of sense there's mischief there.
Yeah.
I sort of wonder, is this him smirking, making all the straight boys confront their brilliance about, looking at ridiculously muscular suits? I don't know.
And it was not a secret for Schumacher that people were going to respond to the nipples because the suits had nipples in Batman Forever, and that was practically the only thing people talked about.
Hmm. Well, he doubled down, and I mean, they're certainly more prominent.
The costume designer was not happy. I saw some stuff from Jose Fernandez because what Schumacher was asking him to do was like take those nipples and make them even pointier and like put circles around them and make them like really big and obvious. And he was just like, okay, you're the boss. Like he didn't think that this was a great idea, and he was basically correct.
Hmm.
And so again, that served as kind of like something that people could hang on to if they wanted to criticize the movie.
But I think that's the odd tension that runs through this whole thing and makes it far more interesting than it's really got any right to be. That on one level, you've got really a Happy Meal stroke toy commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout it, there is this vein of vaguely kinky, subversive weirdness
Yeah.
that, as you say, it's not really particularly sexy. It's not, I don't think it's really meant to be. I think it's just reveling in the sort of mischief of putting this in something very mainstream.
What we got right now is the holy revelation of the car, which is really the big focus here. Now we're all suited up, and then there's a choir just going absolutely nuts. There's these bursts of steam, and Batman and Robin approach the new Batmobile with new, even bigger bat wings. Like they are worshippers paying tribute to the sacred toyness of this object. And Robin's first line, I want a car, which is perfect and exactly what they wanted people to be saying as they saw that.
I was going to say the car looks amazing. So I
Yeah.
think they actually get away with the commercial in this sense. And I sort of wonder, I think people don't really talk about, and I couldn't really find any quotes to back it up, but I see a lot more influence from the animated series in this. I think that
Mm-hmm.
the car particularly, it just looks like a piece of artwork from that and is all the better for it.
Yeah, kind of like stretched out. It's, I think, bigger than it usually is. And then the enormous wings on the end, which do not serve any purpose, I don't believe.
Nope, none whatsoever.
Well, Batman drives off, and then here is another magical fetish item coming up from the underworld, which is the Redbird cycle.
Yeah, well, there's a toy.
They made several toys of this. They made a Wayne Manor Batcave playset. They made a radio control Batmobile and a remote control Batmobile, which I don't know what the difference is at all. There's a Sonic Batmobile, and then they made a little diecast. Robin's Redbird cycle was this awesome like vehicle figure combo, and so that's what they're doing for us right now. They're sort of laying out like, okay, so here's the toys that you're gonna want to buy as soon as you get out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
Batman's like speeding along in his Batmobile to I don't know exactly where, and something bleeps, and all of a sudden, like, here's Commissioner Gordon's face, and I love he says, Batman, a new villain has commandeered the Gotham Museum. I love that he says a new villain, like he's just like reading off the marketing material.
Well, but that's it again. There are a certain number of shots in this that I am sure are moments that are contrived to be dropped into toy commercials, and that one, yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I thought.
I mean, how does that work then for you for making a movie kind of built around that?
I think you have to look at what the proposition is, and if the proposition was that the studio heads wanted a Batman film for 8-year-olds to sell
Right.
toys, then I don't think they were going to be dissuaded from that. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think. I think there's often a sort of expectation that the director should be the line in the sand saying that, and that's not how
He was,
movies
yeah,
work.
he was not interested in that anyway.
And he wasn't interested, which is
Yeah.
why he was the perfect person to do it.
Yeah. And you're saying like that's not how movies work just because they have so much power over this. Yeah.
A lot of the issues, if you perceive them to be like this film, are really go back to that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not the decision I think you or I would take, but I think if you look at what you end up with within those constraints, particularly within the time constraints this thing was made,
Mm-hmm.
I think they put in way more effort all than was frankly required. There could be a much more stripped down, workmanlike, frankly crass version of this film
Yeah.
and this extravaganza we end up with. And I think that is to Schumacher's credit. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
actually to the credit of certainly everyone who's making things for it, the production side of things, the costume side of things.
Right.
No one's phoning it in. And sometimes, you know,
I've
that means they could dial it down a tiny bit, but
actually most of my criticisms of the movie are just places where it's not big enough.
mhm.
I think there definitely are big extravaganza sequences, and then there's also some where I'm like, oh, I wish you'd had another year to work on that and make that just like a bigger space, and a bigger villain. But what we're heading into right now is actually what I think is like the best sequence in the entire movie because this is really really big and crazy, which is the Mr. Freeze intro where he is in the antiquities room of the Gotham Museum, which holds a very strange collection of randomly assorted objects, including a very big diamond and a very big dinosaur, and some vases, and I don't even know what's in
Nothing
there.
else particularly notable.
Yeah, just sort of these huge structures. And here comes Mr. Freeze, like shabooming down the stairs, like the diva that he is, kind of strutting down the staircase. And he's Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's wearing a huge plastic toy costume that makes him look even bigger and bulkier than he is, which is hard to do.
Yeah, well, again, Schwarzenegger is a very interesting part of this because
Yeah,
you saw so much of this seems to have been built around the limitations of getting him to say yes. So as I was reading, he only did 5 weeks. He would only do 12-hour days end to end, which if you
yeah.
consider there's at least an hour and a half makeup either side.
Oh, I read about that. It was 4 hours to get him into that suit.
So that's an 8-hour working day.
Yeah,
And you've probably got five of those a week for 5 or 6 weeks. I mean, that's an
yeah.
incredibly
It's really not
short
a lot.
period of time to film anything, let alone in theory, your star attraction.
Yeah,
And you sort of look at it, and I kind of think, well, I'd really like him to have the bubble on his head, and you can tell there was just a conversation probably shortly after the "Will you shave your head" one.
right.
Like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
Yes. And was that an issue, him shaving his head?
Apparently, yeah, because it made because the makeup time would have been cut by about an hour if he'd have
Right. Yeah.
had to do a bald cap every day. So yes, he said he would and then didn't.
I think that makeup is just it's the most spectacular thing. I love looking at his it's because it's not just he's painted blue. Like he's all modeled and various colors to make up this color scheme on him. And every part of him, like they really cover him up.
Yeah, and he looks terrific. I wish we saw more of him, which
Yeah.
I think the art, which I suspect the armor is and the
Partly there
helmet
for that.
done in a
Yeah.
way so that it doesn't need to be him in long shot.
Yes.
Chris O'Donnell said many times, he never filmed with him once, even though they're in lots of scenes.
Yeah. Every time he's not like fully facing the camera. That's somebody else in that suit. Yeah. One thing I really like about him is that he's always happy. He's delighted to be doing this. He's making little snappy comments. He's joking with everybody. He is having the time of his life, just being Mr. Freeze. So everything looks super fake here, which intentionally, clearly, super fake. This does not look like ice. This looks like Santa's workshop. Like we have created these ice things, and especially like the freeze gun, which I think is fantastic. He points this enormous gun, enormous science fiction gun at a couple of people, and we see them freeze up these security guards, and it's clearly like there's mannequins in there who then have this like huge, I don't know, plexiglass bubble of ice over them.
Yeah, those look terrific. And again, I
Yeah,
one of the things that's really good about this film and is really cherishable about it is it's probably the absolute cusp of where you had to do that stuff for real
Hmm.
You know, if you want the big room full of antiquities, you have to build it. You have to build everything in it. You have to build the ceiling. Whereas even a couple of years later, we were into digital set extensions. And
Right.
I just don't think anyone was ever going to go to that kind of fuss and bother again. And
Yes. Yeah.
the thing I kind of love about these films is the craft of them.
Hmm.
That everything is, and pretty much everything you are seeing in this one is it's been designed or sculpted
Right.
or sewn or fabricated or whatever. So it's kind of it is world building in a very literal sense.
Yeah, everything is supposed to look built, and that is part of the fun of it. Like this is ice that doesn't melt. All of
No,
this ice is clearly like glass and plastic.
there is a sort of odd pride that shines through in that kind of work. You know, you think some
Hmm.
poor person spent a week doing nothing but sculpting icicles to stick on a
Oh, it took them
dinosaur's
forever.
tail.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, I have a sort of grudging respect for that, even when it doesn't look so hot.
Yeah. So one thing that I think is important here is kind of what kind of movie actually is this? As Batman kind of leaps into the room, slides down the Brontosaurus's tail, or a stunt person in a Batman costume, slides down the Brontosaurus's tail, lands in front of this enormous diva man who's all painted blue. You know, people, especially at the time, I think people had a real problem. They're Batman fans, had a real
Mhm.
problem with the movie because this was the Batman thing. We are now we can appreciate it now in a much different way than Batman fans did at the time because now we've seen like now they've had a whole bunch of like dark Batman films, like the people who wanted dark Batman films at the time. Now you've got like five of them and they're all good. And so at the time it was just people were angry because like this is not that film.
I think it all comes down to sort of fan shame, which
Hmm.
applies to any fandom that likes anything.
Right.
The worst thing in the world can be that something you cherish is becomes mockable.
Right.
And
Yeah. Looks
in
silly.
some ways, this is the bravest Batman film ever because it puts itself out there to be mocked in
Hmm.
so many ways. And you know, sometimes does fall very hard and very flat on its face as a result. But I think that's what a lot of this kind of comes down to that, nipples on bat suits, or that makes it silly, or Batman's doing the Fred Flintstone bit down the. Yet that is also taking that as an example. That's the kind of thing I think an 8-year-old playing with an action figure would love
Yes. Yeah,
and would
absolutely.
be reenacting themselves. So it's got, again, this odd tension really comes down to who is the film for, and a certain point in the part of the audience having a sinking realization that that person is not them.
Personally, I would love it if they went kind of further in this direction. I was hoping for a musical. I feel like Mr. Freeze with his cold puns walking down this huge staircase. If he started to sing, that would have absolutely worked for me.
And it looks like a Broadway set.
Yeah.
It's got it's got a central staircase. It's literally proscenium arch. It's and there is something in the performances quite subliminal. I think Chris O'Donnell particularly, he always just has the body language of he's about to break into song.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't quite work out what it is, but he just always looks like he's about to sort of bounce and kind of, go into his solo.
Well, Chris O'Donnell, I feel like, is giving you a real performance in every shot in a way that I don't think that George Clooney is at all.
No, I think, but that actually, as a piece of casting, I think kind of works. That you've got, Clooney is so laid back and is almost sort of horizontal,
Yeah.
you know, tonally at times, and then you've got Chris O'Donnell's and this little scrappy upstart
Yeah.
trying to desperately give as much performance as he possibly can
Hmm.
because he's not going to be in close up if he doesn't.
So in this scene, Robin, he smashes through the door on his motorcycle through a wooden door, which I guess is the front door of the museum. Hard to say. Did he just drive his bike all the way through the museum? It doesn't
Antique,
matter.
antique door at that.
Yeah. And like Freeze's car is in there as well because we got to intro the vehicle. How did that get into that space? We don't know. Doesn't matter. Apparently, it was just built right here. And they get into basically a hockey match dance sequence. And they have built this gorgeous set that you can see from above, where they've got all kinds of like little corners that they can turn and little ramps and things.
Yep, all things you would have in a 200-year-old museum.
and they're little skull skaters, and they kind of are zipping around. Batman and Robin really engage with that here. I think in a way that in other sequences they don't, because they have that scene where they're the shot where they have fallen on their backs and their legs are in the air and they bang their shoes together and ice skates pop out. At that point, like, this is not going to be a slice of domestic realism, this movie. Like, that is sort of the, I think, the ultimate like crazy artificial moment. My question about kind of the rest of this movie is going to be like, can it actually keep up with this level of crazy?
Well, I have a theory, and I did sort of, without sort of wanting to get too far ahead, I think this sequence is kind of in the wrong place.
Oh, really?
I'd love it to be where you end up,
Mm.
because we end up on a big set that's nowhere near as interesting as this, in a set piece that by its nature isn't quite as interesting as this.
By the end, where we're in the observatory.
Wouldn't it be just so much better if we were in this museum?
Yeah, I agree. Or at least something that feels like this, a crazy play space. And then there's a dildo shaped rocket, which just straight up, like, I'm not. I feel like on the whole there is not that much sexuality in this movie, but goddamn, that is actually a dildo shaped rocket, and there's just nothing you can say about it.
Was there a toy of it?
There was. It was included in the Arctic Gotham micro playset. So there was a small one. They didn't make a like a large one that was actually like dildo sized, unfortunately, I guess, or possibly fortunately.
Probably, fortunately.
Yeah. Then they do the silliest things. The way that all this ends up is about as silly as you can possibly be, where they are Batman's in the rocket and Freeze kind of like freezes his hands. Robin basically like climbs up the rocket using magnets as it climbs up
Yeah,
into the
I
sky.
mean, this is a very, very odd sequence. It did occur to me, it's kind of a redux of the thing with Two-Face and the safe at the start of Batman Forever.
Where he's kind of like swinging around over everybody's head.
Yeah, all of that sort of stuff about
The
it's I sort of
helicopter.
it's kind of it's got the same shape as it, and
Yeah,
it's just more bigger and more comic book and more physics defying.
because he is gonna send Batman up into the sky to 30,000 feet, where his heart will freeze and beat no more, and he is trapped, sort of 66 Batman style. Mr. Freeze kind of rockets out of the ship and falls, and he just opens up these crazy butterfly wings, which I think looks terrific and is a complete surprise. It doesn't really fit the theming, but I don't think anything would there. It doesn't matter. They're so pretty.
And again, it feels like another toy thing. It feels like I'm sure there one way you could fold
I
out his
don't
wing.
think there was. No, which is a shame because
That's such a waste.
it's so crazy. Um, and then this the I think the moment where you really have to decide how I'm gonna like you make a conscious decision about how much you're gonna enjoy this is they go out the emergency hatches and use them as surfboards, and they surf through the air as they go down. I believe plummet is typically what you would do
Yeah,
from 20,000 feet up, but somehow they have figured out a way to even Robin even like flips over in midair and
yeah, he's showing
still
off.
stays on his surfboard.
Again, I sort of question it's a very big set piece very early on, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the scale of the film will at times struggle to live up to this.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's hard to get bigger than going up as high as you possibly can and then going down as silly as you possibly can.
And we're only 20 minutes in.
Yes. And the next piece, this kind of breaks things for me as well, because what happens in the next sequence is I don't know where they are. They're just like running through tunnels somehow. It's unclear where they've landed and where they are. There's kind of like a bank vault door, but it kind of feels like a cave. And this is where Robin is sort of leaping after Mr. Freeze, and he says, "Stay cool, bird boy," and freezes him with the gun. And so now we see Robin frozen in place. It works for me every time. I love it. But the piece that I find questionable is like his car smashes in through the wall, which is just gonna happen every time. And he says, "Can you be cold, Batman?" I should not even try and do an imitation. I'm not gonna do it. But he says, like, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna chase the villain or are you gonna save the boy? Ha ha, he says. Your emotions make you weak. That's why this day is mine. Ha 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 ha. he says, you have this choice. You can either chase me or you can help Robin. And then he walks. He is a very large, slow moving thing. And he just kind of like walks over to the wall. And Batman just, this was a problem I had in Batman Forever as well, is I don't think that Batman actually wants to catch criminals. He's just fine with letting them walk away. Now we go to the Arboreal Preservation Project, somewhere in South America.
We really could have done with a caption. Like, has Gotham got palm trees? You
Yeah,
know, in this weird sort of tiki palace. It's just, very, very odd.
it's this very clear model shot. It's one of them like, hey, look, we're doing a model shot. It is showing off the craft of it, I think. It's not really lit in a way that is going to make you think that any of that is real.
No,
But as a little model, it's very cute.
lovely.
And then we see Dr. Pamela Isley, who is all upset because she's trying to mix up an orchid and a rattlesnake, and she's kind of like talking to herself into a tape recorder. She wants plants to be able to fight back like animals. She's gotten very excited about that.
Again, this sort of felt to me like a kind of Batman Forever redux in that
Mm-hmm.
we've done the opening with our established villain who we're not going to give a backstory to till
Right.
later on. We're now gonna this is the one who's going to be transformative, so we see them kind of geeky and a bit inadequate, and
Mm-hmm.
it feels like their heart's not really in doing this transformation, so they are just racing through it. So
Yeah.
she's just spitting exposition at us
Right.
into a dictaphone, which actually I thought, well, that's kind of inspired if you decided you are going to do this in 3 pages.
Yeah.
But yeah, these scenes, the whole scene in this weird complex, wherever it is, they feel like every extraneous
Yeah.
comma has been cut out of that script.
Yes. Yeah. I totally
They
agree.
just
And
want to be done with this.
I think that happens with the sets as well. So this is like that transition that I don't like when I'm looking at this. That I love the free stuff and how big it is and how silly it is. And then here we're in kind of like a dark space with just a bunch of tables and like scientific apparatus type stuff.
Yeah, you can sort of tell. You'll see it a few times where suddenly you stop getting wide shots and
Yes,
everything. This is
yeah.
very TV. I thought it looks like a sort of CW show.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is colored lights, colored key
Yes,
lights, and otherwise very low light levels covering up not very much set.
right. And a thing that they then want to spend time on is John Glover as Dr. Woodrue in the next lab over.
Who is, I was thinking about this, the nearest we get to a supporting character.
Yeah, I think
There
it's
is,
him. It's him, and it's kind of Commissioner Gordon and
yeah, it's,
Gossip Gertie, and that's about it.
and yeah, Mr. Freeze has his sort of henchwoman for about a scene who really doesn't get
Yeah, no,
anything to say.
she's hardly there.
I don't think we even find out her name. Bane, as we'll see, is just kind of a prop.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's an oddly, for something that's so big and so about spectacle, it's very underpopulated.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's odd when you get John Glover turn up and he's giving a hell of a lot of performance. You sort of feel, oh, are you going to be in this a lot? And then, of course,
No,
we very quickly find out he isn't.
he is. He's given a lot. He's given. I feel like too much. I saw John Glover said that Joel Schumacher would like sit on a crane with a megaphone, and before each take, he would say, "Remember, everyone, this is a cartoon." And so Glover was like, "All right, cool, I'll do that." And so the performance that he gives is as large as it could possibly be.
One of the notes I made was I think there is a lot to be said for this film being in tangible spaces
Mm-hmm.
uh, and the craft of that, because I think when it really works is when you have actors reacting to a big space and giving a performance to fill it, which I
Right.
think Schwarzenegger's definitely doing,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in the stuff. And here, it's almost the opposite. You've got someone giving far too much performance for a small space, and particularly as when he's in extreme close up.
Yeah, he's being wacky, I think, which is different from funny.
Yeah, it's very much a. I would say it's the only sort of smug performance. I think it's a
Yeah.
little too knowing. It's a little too consciously cartoony. So yeah, I think he deserved to die.
he's about to build Bane. He's building, what is it, like a super soldier serum. And so they take this guy, they strap him down to basically a Frankenstein table. And he says, by merely drilling 3 concentric holes, I've created viaducts into the most primitive part of his brain. And just like 3 concentric holes. I don't think you can do that. I feel like that's just a bigger hole.
Yes.
But he has drilled into the limbic system. They put a gimp mask on the guy, and then they fill him up with venom, which has all these steroids and toxins. And then we have Bane. And then Bane screams and grows into this huge steroid monster, kind of like yellowish green with painted on veins, which I have a problem with him and his look.
For the role he plays in the film, it's probably the perfect look and the perfect treatment because he is just Poison Ivy's portable thug.
Right.
But of course, you've sort of got this whole problem that by making it Bane, there's a level of expectation which is not
Oh
met.
yeah, no.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
the thing where it's just like, why is that there?
My problem partly is like visually. For one thing, he's just not appealing to look at all. And he doesn't really fit Poison Ivy, like as a Poison Ivy hench person, clashes with everything that she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And my biggest problem, honestly, is big, strong, muscular guy should be a source of visual pleasure in the movie. And he's constantly flexing and showing off his terrible, like what just unfortunately like look like, terrible monster veins. If we wanted to make this movie, more of like a sexuality thing and like a homoerotic thing, like that would be a site of pleasure, which I don't think it is.
It feels very perfunctory. There's no question of him being a character.
And it feels a little, according to like the toyetic rules of what this is for is to sell you stuff.
Mm.
They made like one little like double figure set, small one of Poison Ivy and Bane together. But otherwise, like you couldn't merchandise that guy. Nobody would buy that. Nobody would buy that toy. But here's where we get the Poison Ivy origin, where she gets pushed into a bunch of science stuff. Batman as a franchise has a lot of faith in the power of liquids falling on people and people falling into liquids as a means of personal growth and transformation. And so that's what they do is they just kind of like push her over onto some stuff. And then by the time she gets up.
And this is a very diminishing return scene as well, because it is basically the Selena Kyle scene from
Mm-hmm.
Batman Returns, done with no time and no coverage and no real care.
Right. She just stands up.
She falls down. It's a really bad shot.
Yeah.
And you sort of see the snakes kind
Yeah.
of getting to her face, which could be a really interesting, eerie image, but we cut away from it like that. It's not, everything sort of feels like, it all feels very second unit. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that whole, everything
Yeah,
on
that
the,
sequence. Yeah.
uh, it just feels very going through the motions and like it's got nowhere near enough care in it.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get back to the Batcave. We see Bruce and Dick and Alfred for the first time. Alfred in this movie is going to have a much bigger part and get much more attention than he has before. And so here's where we see Bruce has a video, a magic video that explains everything that happened to Mr. Freeze.
Didn't they do the same thing with Two-Face?
Yes, we saw a little
Sort of
video
exposition video of that as
way
well. Again,
later. Yeah.
it's really interesting how this does feel like, is this sort of Joel Schumacher trying to redo Batman without the irritation of sort of Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey slugging it out? I think it's, yeah, particularly with these kind of double header
Yeah.
films. It's odd that how quickly that became a thing that you couldn't have one villain. It had to be.
Well, that was the toy thing. Is we need
Yeah,
multiple play sets for this.
I guess that makes that of course it is when you say it like that.
Yeah. But he's explaining that Mr. Freeze's wife Nora has McGregor's syndrome, and he was a doctor trying to figure out. He put her into cryo liquid, and is trying to find a cure for her. And Bruce says, "And here's where everything goes north." Which I just like. There's a handful of I think really decent jokes in the movie, and that was one of them. I like that line. And then he falls into cryo liquid. And then one of the worst lines, Robin says, "That's gotta hurt,"
Yes.
which even in 1997 was a cliche we didn't need to hear a lot of.
Mhm.
But once again, two scenes in a row, somebody falls into liquid and comes out perfectly formed as a villain.
It happens.
It does, and his suit uses diamond enhanced lasers to keep
This
him
I
at
didn't
0 degrees.
understand. Does it eat diamonds? Because there
Apparently, it
seems to
does.
be this. Okay, all
Yeah,
right. That's why I was wondering. All right,
yeah. Not that that makes any sense. I guess the metaphor is that diamonds are kind of like ice. And
right.
so the idea is he needs to keep chucking diamonds into a panel on his suit and it will kind of melt them.
Sounds very scientific.
Yes, absolutely it is. Yeah, and what it's giving us is just a guy who needs diamonds. And so we're gonna see a lot about that. And Batman and Robin having their first little spat.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting, isn't it? Because I sort of question is Chris O'Donnell just about 5 years too old to be playing moments this juvenile? But I suppose it was the 90s, wasn't it? And I guess we had much old, you would have 20 somethings playing teenagers and things
Right.
all the
Yes.
time. Maybe that's something that's more apparent nowadays.
Yeah. But I agree with you that it's a little silly that he's having like just teenager spats all the time. It happens a lot throughout the movie.
Well, it's really his only character beat, isn't it? Other than that, and kind of being uh, sort of simultaneously horny but oddly sexless around Barbara.
So here's my problem with the movie. Here's my where folks are talking about this as a homoerotic movie. And I feel like there is some homo, but I don't see the erotic at all.
I think the whole film sort of became a meme before that was a thing, in the sense that it was, oh, this tacky gay dude
Yeah.
has made Batman all queer, and it actually, I don't think it's a particularly gay film. I think it's a very MTV film. I think that
Mm-hmm.
colorful, kind of gaudy neon aesthetic that was very on trend, and I think that was very over time. And maybe in hindsight, as all of that's faded
Looks
away,
silly. Yeah.
maybe that does feel a bit more kind of disco or
Right.
I don't know, theatrical or whatever. But no, I mean I don't think it's quite a sexless film.
Yeah, it really is.
You've kind of got Poison Ivy, who is probably the nearest to uh, a sort of sexy character, but she's sort of doing these Mae West style
Yeah.
doing entendres that don't really mean anything
Yeah.
in exactly the way Mae West used to.
A weird thing is she's the sexual character, but she can't actually get anybody to be attracted to her unless she drugs them. So there's
Yes.
not even any kind of like real she doesn't have any real desire towards everybody. And here with Bruce and Dick, like the scene that I would compare this to is there's one, I don't know when the last time was that you saw Batman Forever, but there's a scene kind of similar early on in Batman Forever with Val Kilmer and Chris O'Donnell
I know
like
the one you mean.
taking off their suits in the Batcave and yelling at each other and being and having this kind of like urgent, passionate conversation. And they both have their shirts off. And that was like one of, I believe, two moments in Batman Forever where I was like, oh, there's an actual like a little bit of queerness here. And here they're basically doing the same thing, but Bruce has a long sleeve shirt on. We never see his chest. We never see like anything that would make him like an object of desire here.
It's interesting that probably of the three Batmans up to that point, Clooney is the most conventional
Mm-hmm.
pin-up. And at that point he was Mr. Network TV. He was the most
Yeah,
attractive man on network TV. I'm sure TV Guide was doing polls to
was all
prove it.
over him. Yeah,
And yet he's oddly dialing it down, and
yeah,
I can't quite work out what the reason for that is. Whether it's and bear in mind he was shooting this sort of in moments between ER. Uh,
yes, yeah. That was the thing that he Monday to Thursday he was on the set at ER because this was
and the idea that
similarly Warner Brothers.
this is kind
Yeah,
of his weekend job is
yeah. So
yeah.
Friday to Sunday he comes, and so he's working 7 days a week, and he's doing this Friday to Sunday.
And possibly is there a sort of maybe that's the reason you measure the amount of energy you're willing to put into things. But I sort of sense that even in scenes where he could be sort of twinkle and
Mm-hmm.
brood and really shine through the screen. He's kind of doing it at a low wattage.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you see he puts a lot of effort into the scenes with Michael Gough. I
Hmm.
think you can really, I think that's where the nearest you sort of see, sort of, I guess, a twinkle, if you want to call it
Yeah.
that. But yeah, scenes like this, it at times it kind of feels like he's sleepwalking through them,
Yes.
which is odd because you've got Chris O'Donnell is putting in the energy for both of them, and I
It feels to me like Chris O'Donnell is still acting opposite Val Kilmer.
mm,
He's basically giving the same kind of performance that he did in Batman Forever, but in Batman Forever he got a lot more coming back.
and I suspect, no disrespect to him, so I think he's good in this film. I think he's
Yeah.
actually a very good Robin. But I would imagine he probably did not have the experience to actually modulate his performance
Mm-hmm.
to a different lead, and that's probably where direction should have come in. And Joel
Oh, I don't.
sat
The
up
funny thing
higher
is,
with his
yeah.
megaphone was probably not giving that kind of direction.
Well, that's something I actually like, and this may just be because I like the performance more, but I'm blaming Clooney for that. I think O'Donnell is doing like the correct amount of passion. I would rather have not have him dial down to meet Clooney. I'm blaming Clooney for not putting in enough effort.
Yeah, I don't think you can really. I don't think it's the kind of film, and I don't. Again, what I was saying about size of sets and things like that. I don't think you can be on a big operatic stage like the Batcave and be
Hmm.
smirking.
Right, kind of casual.
It's not a bad performance, but it's kind of underpowered in a very overpowered film.
I feel like it disappears. Because like I was saying, like that Mr. Freeze scene, that is what I like. That is where I want everyone to be, and he's just doing the opposite of that. So now we got Poison Ivy getting up with a saxophone solo, and she says, "The animal plant toxins had a rather unique effect on me. I'd like this. They replaced my blood with aloe, my skin with chlorophyll." I'm like, did they though? All of that? Are you now? She's now herbal essences, and now she's got poison lips, and so she kisses John Glover, and he dies, and she's all sassy and very excited about becoming Mother Nature.
I like what she's doing with it. I like the character. I think it's an entertaining performance, and it's I did see find an interview quote of her where she said, what did she call it? She called it something. She describes it as an opera part, which
Mm,
I thought, well, you know what film you're in,
yes, yeah, for sure.
and operatic uh is exactly probably the level you should be going for. I'm not sure she quite gets there all the time, but she's trying.
Well, we go the next set we go to is the Snowy Cones Ice Cream Factory, which is Freeze's lair and an actual musical number.
I love
Um,
this. This is actually one of my favorite bits in the whole film.
yeah, where they're showing like the year without a Santa Claus. They're showing the Snow Miser. Tell me about it.
I just think, firstly, Mr. Freeze looks amazing in that costume
Oh, with the robe.
with the robe and the polar bear slippers and
Yeah.
the star and the little ascot. Uh, I think that's just great. And I like the kind of high farce of the poor henchmen trying to eat their frozen TV dinners whilst not enjoying the film.
Yeah.
Uh,
And he's trying to
it,
make them sing.
it's, I think it's great.
Yeah.
I just love that. I just love that scene.
I wish that people could see the enormous smile that you have just thinking about it more
No,
than
it's just
anything. Yeah.
I just love that layer as well. I mean, the sort of the outside of it with that cutesy little model with
Hmm.
the snowman's face, and then obviously it's lined with frozen TV dinners on the inside.
Yeah.
It's just
They pulled it together for Mr. Freeze. They really spent a lot of time on him and on all of the design elements around him. I totally
Mhm.
agree about this like beautiful costume that's all patterned and but is like not exactly the same color, but just it all kind of blends together.
And his hench person, I forget what does she actually ever get a name?
I know her name, but I know it from the credits. They don't say anything. Her name is Ms. B. Haven.
She's got this amazing costume. It
Yeah.
just looks the whole thing just looks great. I just love that sequence.
He needs one more diamond, one more giant diamond to complete his whatever this is. There was another toy,
Yeah.
which it's not actually in the movie, but is sort of spiritually from here, which is the cryo freeze chamber with working capture claw. It looks completely different from the cryo chamber that she's in,
Too bad. I would love a playset of that factory, whatever it is.
of the whole freeze hideout.
Yeah. Open up the big snowman head. That'd be amazing.
And now we got Barbara showing up. One more intro for this movie. Alicia
Yeah.
Silverstone coming by, ringing on the doorbell. Chris O'Donnell is very happy to see her and look at her.
I like that she's wearing her school uniform after what is at least an 8-hour flight.
And she got kicked out of school anyway.
Yeah. I understand the sort of visual exposition going on, but it's like, really?
Yeah. But she is a challenging, I feel like she is a challenging character in this movie, i.e. like difficult to watch and enjoy.
It's odd, isn't it? I don't really know what's kind of wrong with it. I was trying to sort of work it out because, yeah, I don't warm to her at all.
Yeah.
I just don't, I can't really articulate why.
Well, there's so much that's supposed to be written onto her. She's supposed to be a computer genius. That's a thing that they mention right at the top here. They say that she was in computer science at school, and then at the very end, she gets one tiny little moment to be a computer genius. She does the motorcycle racing, so she's kind of supposed to be a badass as well.
Hmm.
And to be someone then who can jump into a Batgirl suit and come and play with the boys. But then Alicia Silverstone is not playing any of that here. She's just playing blonde, young, kind of dim girl that's just showed up.
Yeah, it's really, really odd, isn't it? And I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, possibly, I mean, I think it probably is a casting thing, in the sense that I think you probably needed someone who would have a natural quality that would just project a character in the absence of one.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not really doing anything to fill the gaps. And I think also, um, is she slightly too famous? Is there sort of a
She might be,
gravitational
yeah.
is there a sort of gravitational pull here that makes you think this supporting character is far more important and significant than she actually is, and
Yeah.
which because she isn't particularly. Um, I don't know. I mean, does it work if you've not seen the pre-publicity and you don't know she's going to be Batgirl? And I think it probably doesn't.
Yeah, well, she's not bringing any kind of like conflict in. She's not bringing any story in. She's just showing up. And so this is, a thing that I write about and talk about all the time is the three rules to get somebody to get the audience to like a character, which is you make a friend, you make a joke, and you make something happen that moves the plot along. And she
Yeah.
does jokes. Like she's got some lines here. She's friends with Alfred and very quickly friends with Dick as well, but she doesn't make anything happen. And
Mm.
she goes back and forth a little bit. Like there's this little subplot of she steals Dick's motorcycle sometimes. It's pointed in a different direction from the rest of the movie, and she's definitely not kind of moving the movie forward. And this, I guess, is really toy driven as well. Like they just wanted another hero. They wanted somebody else to be in the movie.
It's pity because I think the actual intent of making this sort of less of a bro franchise and
Mm-hmm.
open it up was actually quite um was a good thing. And I think some of the, and actually to Schumacher's credit, he defended Alicia Silverstone
Right.
um during all the press junkets when there's some really just gross
What was it like?
about her
People
weight.
people were talking about her weight and that she was
Yeah,
too
and
fat to be a
supposedly
background.
it was sort of being snarked about on set by people. I mean, it just
Yeah,
sounds really, I mean, just disgusting to be
yeah,
honest. And I,
yeah.
I can remember it being in the papers here,
Mm-hmm.
like girl
Yeah,
as a headline in tabloids. No exaggeration. So it was. I mean, the press was pretty disgusting about that, and
yeah.
sort of something that wouldn't really happen now. But I,
But the thing that's
I feel again that sort of weirdly became the talking point. Like, is
yeah.
this girl too fat to be a superhero? Which is kind of awful.
Well, I think
Um,
the unfortunate thing is, the response to that should be stop focusing on her weight. She's amazing. Like, look how great she is. Look what she brings to this part. And unfortunately, that part isn't there. Like, she's not obviously
No,
gonna
and
bring a
she
ton
doesn't
as
look. It's
Batgirl.
not like the strange thing is she doesn't look heavy in the film. It's not really a
No,
that's not a problem at all. But yeah, unfortunately, what you want is the happy ending would be yes, she's amazing
she's
and
amazing in it. Yeah,
we all love her. And unfortunately, I don't think. I don't think even the people it was aimed at loved her.
Yeah, I agree.
I can't imagine the girls in the audience thought she was great. Yeah.
You want to let's go to the observatory.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I don't know if you remember Gossip Gertie from Batman
I
Forever.
do. I do. She's all over this one.
Yeah, but she's dialed down, which is so frustrating for me. In Batman Forever, she does these kind of huge, like,
Edward, how does it feel to be the city's newest, most eligible bachelor? Gotham must know. Oh, there's Bruce Wayne.
she's so crazy and huge. And here, like, I like seeing her and I like having her around, but like, she doesn't go as big as that, unfortunately.
Although the thing I notice is that both her big scenes are with Elle Macpherson,
Yes,
and
yeah,
I would wager there were a lot of takes done on those scenes. Because I mean I
because
think well
Elle is not giving us enough.
Ella's not giving a whole lot of anything. I mean
Yeah,
she's really I don't want to be cruel about something, but I mean she gives the impression of someone who won this role in a cereal contest or something. I mean she
yes,
just
yeah,
looks
yes. She's Julie
she just looks
Madison.
she does
She's the
not really look like a human being.
Yeah, she's sort of just standing there. I mean, she's a model. Is she even an actress? I didn't really
I don't
look into
I
this.
I don't think
Has she
she
done
was.
other acting?
She wasn't at the time, and I don't think she's been since. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think she was cool, and it was uh, seen as this incredible. But it's sort of odd that even though she's this model, she gets really hardly any close ups. She's sort of always in
yeah,
wide shot.
yeah.
It feels like they've minimized her in the edit ruthlessly, and she just gives the impression of a member of the public who's
Mm.
kind of sort of
Who's
eased herself into the edit
suddenly?
shots.
Yeah. And this at the observatory where Gossip Gertie is talking to Bruce and Julie and asking if they're going to tie the knot. Bruce has, I think, like the most stilted way of delivering marriage. Yeah, well, marriage. Oh my God, dude, like you can't do that scene.
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah, it's such an odd that whole thing though. It's just such a weird scene. I mean it's bad in the sense that again, 40 minutes in, this character turns up who
Hmm.
apparently means a lot to Bruce, who we've not even heard her name,
Yeah,
seen a glimpse of her. Which again, I'm sure there was an earlier scene or something that's uh was deleted the moment it was shot.
right.
But it yeah, it just doesn't really work.
Yeah.
And it's not and again, the scene would just be so much easier if that character was not there.
Yes. Yeah.
I feel,
It is. Yeah.
I
It is
don't want to
weird that.
sort of drag someone who's not an actress, not an actor, for not giving a hell of a lot of a performance, but it
Mhm.
just feels like a really
Well, it's
just
hard to
not
know. Yeah, like you say,
thing to do.
it's hard to know why she's there. She's kind of like filling what would have been the Nicole Kidman role, but
Mm.
they pay a ton of attention to Nicole Kidman in Batman Forever. Yeah, they're just not interested in her, and she's just sort of there for no particular
I mean,
reason.
you barely hear her name. It's
Yeah.
sort
Yeah.
of wind back and go, oh, that's what you're called.
Right.
And it just feels like, oh, you're Batman's girlfriend. Batman has a girlfriend in these films. Oh, well, it's a
Right.
glamorous woman.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, I
you're a
guess
glamorous
so.
woman. You could be that. But she doesn't. The nearest she gets to a sort of moment is the second scene with Gossip Gertie, which I guess we'll get to.
Yeah.
It's a moment. It's barely that.
Well, this observatory is such an odd place. Bruce is donating the world's most advanced telescope to Gotham's observatory restoration project, and they talk about the science of what this is supposed to do, which is that there are satellites in orbit that are allowing them to reflect light from any given point around the planet. And so from here, we'll be able to see the sky anywhere on Earth, reflected back to our very own Gotham City for observation. My question is, what does Joel Schumacher think a telescope is?
I don't think. Well, we'll never know. I think it's Chekhov's telescope, isn't it? We know it's going to be significant. It's getting a big speech.
Yeah.
It gets more of an introduction than poor Batman's girlfriend does. So, yeah, it's going to be significant. But yes, it's a it's the science in this film generally is a mystery, but that bit
Yes,
is particularly
too
mysterious.
strange. Well, things are heating up for our Caped Crusaders. Seems like there's no way to stop Mr. Freeze, and the audience has absolute zero idea what's going on. So that means this is the end of Act 1 of Batman and Robin. I will be releasing Act 2 later this week. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you.
I'll meet you back here for Act 2, Batman and Robin, on the Superheroes Everyday podcast. Thanks for listening.
I got mine. Where's yours?
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!